Hello, everybody, and welcome to a doubly special episode of our famous and amazing show and tell series. I'll tell you why it's special in two ways. First, it's the first one of 2025, our first show and tell of 2025. And second, it is a returning guest, a show and tell alumnus is in the room with us. So I'm Paul Moderman. With me, as always, is the incredible Yelena Perfilieva. And with us today to do some super cool show and tell is Vadim Klimov. Vadim, please. I mean, I know people probably watched your first one. I hope they do. If not, the link is down below. But please do a quick intro of yourself, your interests, your whatever, and then let's dive right in and get the goodies going.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Elena. Hello to everybody. So my name is Vadim Klimov, and it's a super honor for me to be here for the second time, which means that I need to present something hopefully interesting, hopefully useful. We will see how it goes this time, but it's really a pleasure for me. So my background is SAP technology. For quite a long time, I was focused on SAP integration technologies. Nowadays, it's a mix of SAP integration services and SAP BTP. One way or another, it's a lot of tech stuff happening in my day-to-day work and also in my day-to-day interests. So outside of work, I primarily focus on community and technologies which can be applied to integration suite, to advanced mesh, and all the things around them. That's all about me.
Awesome. I mean, from the last episode that we did with you, and just your presence in the community, getting messages from point A to point B is like synonymous in my head with Vadim. So that's what I love to hear, and I am really excited because the three of us have talked a little bit before the show about what you're going to talk about. I am really excited to get that stuff in front of people's eyeballs so they can watch and learn and be part of the peanut gallery with us as you take us through the cool things that you're up to. So, I mean, without it, unless you object, let's just dive in and go, and let's start talking about the tech.
Yeah.
Let it go. Let it go. Let me share my screen and let's dive into it. So today we will also have lots of terminal stuff. So
Beautiful.
just briefly, I will spend some time in the browser and then we will go back to the terminal. So today I will speak, I will show some things which may become handy in scenarios where we need some automation or we need some bulk activities or we just need to make stuff done where standard tools doesn't work. So I will give an example of one of services with BTP services with which I work on literally on daily basis in cloud integration, out of integration suite. However, techniques and tools that we will look into, most of them will be usable elsewhere outside. And literally, whenever we see an API which we can call, these tools shall be applicable. And then we can also dive into and explore, brainstorm what are other possible use cases for those tools. And those tools are not a replacement to standard tools, which we already have under the belt. It's more to complement those tools and to see how else and what else we can use and if it's really our pair of shoes. And when I say that, it's not necessarily meant to be useful and handy for everybody. But if there is somebody who will find it useful, I think job done for me, that would be great.
Yes. So, yeah. And that's the point. I mean, that's the point of sharing tools, right? Is just like, I found it useful. I hope somebody else does too, and get it out there in the world, right? So that's, we love it. We love it.
Yeah. So the first thing, we'll start from Integration Suite, the standard UI, and this is how the developer will see the tenant when they develop integration scenarios and when they do all the things they need to do with the integration artifact. So we have a bunch of packages. Within packages, we have some artifacts such as integration flows. For the sake of demo, I picked up a very simple one. It does nothing. It just accepts data and responds back. In real life, so this one, demo flow 1, we have demo flow 2, etc., etc. Some others may be more complex. So some others may have a lot of steps inside. And this is where SAP integration developers spend days and days developing those integrations. And this is done graphically. So our tool of choice is CPI of Integration Suite, where we do this kind of development. And sometimes it's necessary, it really is the saver for us. But sometimes we need to make some operations which require involvement of many objects. I will give you an example. So for example, I have two packages, one integration flow in one package. I have two integration flows in the other package. We can imagine that there could be hundreds and hundreds of such iflows spread across a lot of different packages. And let's assume that we need to find something in all of them, some common attributes, or check one attribute in all of them. Or in this demo, we will have a look into, we need to make a change in one attribute across all of them. In normal cases, we will have to click one by one in WebUI to make this change, to save, and go the next one, and try not to miss something. Here I have 22 packages, but in real life, it could be hundreds of packages.
Yeah.
And in each package could be tens and tens of different integration flows. That's a task. Now we need to see how we solve it, if we solve it and how we can solve it. So from the web UI, we cannot do it. So web UI is really great when we work with each and every object, not with bulk scanning or bulk update. And when I say scanning, it's possible like we want to make an audit. We want to make sure that something is used or something is not used within the tenant. But we have APIs at our rescue, and this is where I go to Business Accelerator Hub. So what I will do is I will explore. So I want to have a look into what we have for cloud integration.
And while you do, Vadim, just Business Accelerator Hub used to be known as API Hub, which I thought was simpler name. But if anyone is confused, like why for APIs you go to whatever Business Accelerator Hub may mean, that's why.
Yeah, I still, in my memory, I still have it like API subcom.
I refuse to call it anything else but API Hub.
So we have here public APIs, and those things which we execute on WebUI, we can also access programmatically. So for example, we have a lot of APIs through which we can access and amend packages, artifacts, and this will be our friends for all the demos that we will have today. Under the bonnet, we will invoke those APIs, a few of them. So I will firstly have a look into how they look like. So let me take a Bruno as HTTP client token. So under the bonnet, we will have something like this. So we have JSON, for example, with a list of all packages, which is quite similar to what we saw in here. And we have another API where we can get properties of the package. Similarly, we can download data and upload data. So this is how it looks from perspective of Bruno, or if you like Postman or some other HTTP client. So that will be something that will fuel our demo. So it will be hidden from eyes, but literally everything revolves around this kind of APIs. So what we will do now is we're done with the browser for now. We will go to terminal. And what I will do is we'll go to a folder. So first, for our use case, we need to make the amendment. For example, we want to change a URI path. So in all iflows where the URI path is demo, we want to change it to Ben. And as I said, in normal life, it will require clicking in each iflow and changing things. We will have a look in the techniques which can help us to bulk download all this data, manipulate this data, and put it back to the tenant. And for this one, we are going to use Neovim, the text editor, really configurable, really extensible, and it runs in the terminal. For someone who likes other editors, maybe Visual Studio Code or Z or anything else, no problem at all. So a lot of these things we can do in other editors. Just I will use Neovim as an example how we can customize and how we can use third-party tools within our IDE.
I like that. I like that because I think one of the best purposes of tools is for people to sort of cobble together their own perspective on something, right? So if VS Code is your flavor of choice for this kind of stuff, the purpose of good tools is so that you can turn your experience into the one you need, which is why tools like this and the APIs, of course, are like they're the powerful piece of the equation in like making your experience your own in this stuff.
Yes, and there is even a term for that, personalized development environment rather than
Oh,
integrated development environment. That
I don't think
it's
I've heard
the
that. That's
idea
awesome.
that you can really customize for yourself, and it means all aspects of layout, UI, plugins that you install, and so on and so on. And we will see that some tools which are traditionally terminal tools, CLI tools or TUI tools, we will embed them into Neovim, and we will feel like we're using it as a part of the environment. Let's call it this way.
Mm.
Yeah, it's
Um,
neat.
so what I'll do is I will create a folder. Currently, it's empty directory, where we will dump all content from the tenant. And to show you and our listeners how we can actually quickly spin up Neovim, I will start from the scratch. So what I will do is I will firstly will remove all configuration of Neovim. Gone. So
Oof, we're blowing it away right now, guys.
it is, we are starting from scratch. So we only have Neovim, and the experience user interface looks like this. This is what you will see when you start Neovim out of the box. It's usable as a text editor. You can already do some things, but it's not usable to extent that we want it. So we will need to configure it for ourselves. And for that, all configuration is text-based. So it's in the past it was Vim script. Nowadays it's more common to use Lua language. So what I did in advance, I prepared the configuration, and it lives in my Git repository. So literally what I will do is I will download it and place it to the config Vim directory, where Vim by default will look for the configuration. So done. My configuration is now on the laptop. Now we start Neovim once again, and this is where it will be hands-off exercise. So I will press enter, and I will just put my hands off. So now the magic happens. Now
Whoa.
it creates configuration. It installs all plugins that are required, that are defined in the configuration. It applies all kind of layout, theming, installation, build of all which is needed to create my environment that I defined in the configuration. There you go.
Hey, look at that. What a great config.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty good one.
That's awesome.
So there is, you see, it's personalized.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
PDE. I'm glad you taught me that term. I had not heard that term before, but like makes perfect sense
Yeah.
as a developer thing. PDE.
And I will exit it. And one other thing we will see now, it will start way quicker, because literally it was from zero to the environment that was defined in the configuration files. And you see that literally you can have it anywhere. So I put it in the GitHub. We can have it on USB stick or somewhere else on the file server. As far as we can copy it to the machine where we want to start it, we can spin up the environment which is customized by us and for us in a matter of few seconds. Then you have to spend quite some time to configure that. So you have to plug in different plugins depending on which languages you use, and so on and so on. So this may be challenging. Good thing is there are some IDEs which are based on Neovim and which come as prepackaged out of the box configuration that you can use as a starting point so that you don't start from scratch, or you can build your configuration yourself. And now we start, and you can notice that it starts very quickly.
Yeah.
Even with the
crazy.
rendering of the splash startup screen, I mean, it's not super powerful at the moment. So it's not like it supports all languages which exist in the universe, but it will do the job for now, and it starts very quickly. That's it. So we're done with the Neovim. Now it's ready. Now what we need to do is we need to do the real job. So again, I go back to Neovim, I close this one. in Neovim, what we will do first is, firstly, we will have a look before we are dumping something from CPI tenant. We will have a look if we are in the correct tenant. Here we go. A lot of things in Neovim are based on key mappings. So that's something which is also super customizable, but you have to memorize them and you have to keep track about which key bindings are used for which purposes. So from Neovim interface, we jumped into the tool called CPI Navigator. So that one connected to our CPI tenant, and we can see that we are truly in that tenant. So it feels like we are in the right place. It doesn't do much, but we can browse the tenant. We can open from the terminal the package or artifacts. So literally, when we are
that's pretty slick.
When we are in here, we can refresh it. For example, if something happened and somebody updated, we can open and we can see the particular, for example, integration flow and dive into changing its configuration straight away. Right in here. So yeah, we are in the right terminal. Now what we need to do is we will dump the configuration. And for this one, I will use another tool, which is the open source development by our Swee, Yeoh, who is the SAP mentor. So that's the open source tool called FlashPipe. So I will make a snapshot. But what it does now is, again, using CPI Navigator is something that I developed last year just as a demo. And also for me, it was a really nice practice with Go development and TUI development. I really didn't develop TUI tools in the past. And this one, FlashPipe, is also, it's written in Go using APIs. It allows integration and synchronization between Git repositories and CPI tenant. And it's bidirectional. So you can dump data, you can also upload data, done.
So it's
it doesn't,
it's for Integration Suite.
It is truly, when Swee developed this tool, it really closes the gap when we wanted to store artifacts that we develop in CPI outside of the tenant, and if we would like to make them Git version controlled. So the tool really does this great job, and it allows to download data, it allows to upload changes from Git repository. So now we are there. So what we can do now is, we can explore what actually was downloaded. You will see that not everything has been downloaded because some packages are configured only per package content. We cannot edit it. But those custom packages that we created, they are all in here. So what we can do is we can navigate. This is literally, they live on the directory, on the file system. So if I go and if I look into here, we will see all of them are in here. Actually, nice thing, the terminal tool that I use, Ghostty, it allows some quick access to quick terminal. So we can quickly do something in here, list, close it. So we are back to Neovim. So the package and iflows, this all is a character-based configuration. So it's a bunch of XML files, JSON files, and property files, which is a nice use case for text editors like Neovim. So we treat everything as text, and we would like to analyze this text, or we would like to update this text. And this configuration, what we see in Web UI, it's well defined within configuration files that get downloaded. So this is what we will be working with. So one thing is we can go and, for example, I will go to demo one, I will find the iflow. Here we go, that's the XML file. That's the definition of the flow that we saw in the Web UI, and I can see the structure.
Yeah, structure there. Oh, that's nice. That's nice.
It's really generic. So you will see that it requires some time to get used to this one, but everything that we click in Web UI for the iflow is in here from configuration perspective of the iflow. Yep. We can search. So we can search for demo. Here we go. We found it. The power of Neovim is that there are quite a lot of motions that we can quickly select part of the string or several lines of the string. So for example, I want to select everything which is between forward slashes and so on. Or I want to change the word. So I will go like this. I want to change the what and put Ben in here. So that's very powerful in Neovim. So we can quickly navigate through the text. And another feature that may become handy is undo functionality or undo tree. That's something which a lot of text editors will have. I mean, we have undo or redo buttons. But in here, it's a part of Neovim, so that every time we change something in the buffer, and what we see here is the buffer representing the file content, will be recorded in memory. And it's possible that we can also save these states on the disk. So in my configuration, I save them on the disk so that if I exit Neovim, if I enter again, the history of changes will not be flushed. And we can keep changing.
You know, that just that by itself, I am taking that away as a like, oh my God, I need that kind of thing. Because like that's one of the reasons I always hesitate to close my editors is because I don't personally have one of those tools enabled. And I always fear that I will, just like you're saying, I like to like jump back and forth in like, I changed that. No, I didn't. I changed that, but then I changed that. Like, and I don't want to close my editors and lose that. So persisting that little thing right there is like, for me, that's worth the whole video right now. Like that's like, boom, love it.
Great, you like that. And I must say that's a standard feature. So the view that you see on the left, that's a plugin that I installed in Neovim, undo tree. But the undo functionality is really a part of Neovim. So you don't need to do anything, except that if you want to save it on the disk, then you will need to enable that in the configuration. But the configuration is standard. And also you can go back and forth. So for example, I recall that, well, actually, and you see that it keeps changing. So I can now change the what, and for example, I want to put demo back, but then rather than flow one, I want to put it flow one, like this. Hold on. Like this. Or for example, I realized that, well, that doesn't look good, but I remember that two saves ago, it's not even save, it's the undo step. That was the version that I would like to use. So I go back to this version. I can again change to the value that I want. And you see that this looks not like a linear change. So it's not like it keeps saving the last change and the changes before, but you can really navigate it back and forth. And you see kind of a tree structure.
Yeah.
So you can go up to the most recent ones, you can go back. Not to say that it's something that you can do just in here. So there is undo thing, and you will see that it goes back and back and back. But the beauty is that you can navigate and you can come to some change which happened in the past, and it will keep branching of these changes. So you can revert to 5 changes back, make some amendment, and it will create a new branch for this. And this is currently by default in memory or saved on the disk, so it doesn't take any effort from the developer to make the use of this functionality. And this functionality will keep it, and it will remind you when these changes happened. And in the bottom part, you will see what was the change. So what was the old value? What was the new value? So there is something that it reminds. And to me, it reminds the experience of using Git to some extent.
Yeah.
So if I now open, so what I did before the recording, I downloaded as an example a Git repository of Neovim. So we will just have a look. Oops, sorry, not Git clone, Git log. And you will see that Git
very
log
similar.
just very decorated and a single liner. It looks very similar.
Yeah.
So what we see here, except that even though we dumped it in Git repository, what you see here, it's not a Git functionality. It's functionality of Neovim. And in this way, we can if we come from the Git background, then it's something that may become quite familiar to us. If we don't come from the Git background and we don't use Git in our normal life, then it's something that can be used like a bridge so that we get used to this branching. It's not a real branch like in Git, but it gets visualized and we can go back and forth as if we were in the Git tree of commits, except that here it's not a commit, here it's a fact of change. That is another feature that may become handy. But what we will do is we're not going to do and to change these files one by one by one by one, because we may have lots of them. So what we will do is let's close this file. One option is we can search for these files. So we can, for example, search for some XML files. Nothing here. And we can look into what's inside in here. That's a good option. So we can find files which are relevant, we can open them and change. Again, it's not something that we want to have here. What we will do is we will search for all files for the occurrence of demo. And we're not interested in those which are metadata of the package. We don't want to change the description of the package. And so we will just select those which are definition of the iFlow. We selected, here is 3, it could be 10, it could be 50. And what we will do is we will send them to the thing which is called a quick fix list in Neovim. So we can apply the same action to almost unlimited number of files. And then what we do is find and replace all. We replace demo with ban. Done. Now if we...
That was almost too fast.
It was fairly quick.
It was very fast.
It's kind of we are now working on my laptop, so we're not working with a tenant because we cloned, we copied configuration of packages and iFlows. So we're currently doing changes on our local machine. So we can quickly scan things, change things, we can break things, and we can recover things because we are now in the Git repository. And now we see that we can actually have two flavors of breaking things and restoring things, because we can rely on undo tree, and then we can save changes, and we are then in the Git territory. And talking about Git territory, since we're in Git repository, we need to somehow stage changes and commit changes. And for this one, we could have used Git commands, but we have another tool for the terminal, which is called LazyGit. And in the past, we learned about another lazy tool, LazyDoc, and now it's LazyGit. So LazyGit is a terminal tool which you can use as a standalone, but it also has a plugin for Neovim. So this is how it looks like. So in the Neovim screen, we now see everything that is in the repository. It actually uses Git commands under the bonnet. And then what we can do is we can firstly stage all these changes. So we see the 3 iFlows, and in 3 iFlows, we made these changes staged. And now we can commit them. So we will commit, and we will write something like refactor, demo, change, URI, path. Done. So now everything has been committed.
Awesome.
Still, it's not yet in the tenant, but it's Git controlled. So now if we go into commits, you can see that it was the initial commit where we did a snapshot. There was a commit when we made changes. So it's now Git controlled, and we can push it, for example, to GitHub or GitLab or to any of the other Git-based platform. So this becomes controlled, auditable, and we can go back and forth in versions. Although maybe it's not that pretty it doesn't look that pretty as it's in Web UI, but it's a text which we can put under version control. And now what we will do is we will again use the FlashPipe tool to push these changes back to the tenant. So again, go to FlashPipe, and this time I upload changes. So what it does now is it picks up changes from the last commit and pushed it to the tenant. Done. So let's have a look. what we got. If we got any updates. And here you see the last modified date. It feels like something got updated just a few seconds ago, which is a good sign. So let's open it. And let's see if it actually updated the configuration. Here we go.
There it is.
And
There it is.
if I go to another one, so we're updated three flows. So if I go to another one, and we'll have a look there, we shall see that it got updated as well. This is the fingers crossed moment.
Hey.
Here we go. And you see that
Awesome.
we updated 3 iFlows. We could update 100 iFlows. Maybe it will take a bit longer, a few seconds more. But
that's really incredible in terms of like so especially for somebody like me, like I probably go poke at iFlow once in a blue moon, right? I hardly ever spend I review things every now and again. I look at things. I rarely make changes myself, but I can see the because having used iFlows a few times, I see now the power of this because I spent so much time hunting around. Like the GUI experience is good for like I can make a pretty picture of like my boxes together. But when I have to go like hunting around and finding things,
Yeah.
that's where I lose like fast power, right? That's where I lose zip 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 that we just saw here is that part of it for me. And frankly, having seen the way you do it here, I didn't know what I was missing. I just like my brain just went to was like, okay, you gotta kind of click around and do stuff, but like clearly you don't. Clearly you can like put these other tools in your backpack and do that. That's this is cool. This is cool.
thank you. And you see that under the bonnet, we used public API, so we didn't interfere and we didn't violate API contracts. So
Yeah.
everything that we did, everything that those tools did, they all are based on standard APIs and on capabilities of the Neovim and other plugins and Git ecosystem and so on. And hopefully you got this feeling hopefully you will share this feeling that it was transparent enough to feel like we were in the boundaries of the same environment.
Yeah.
Although effectively we pulled out multiple different tools. So we had Neovim with a bunch of plugins. We had LazyGit, which was opened in the Neovim. We had CPI Navigator. We had FlashPipe, which was called. So FlashPipe, CPI Navigator, they all are different tools and even tools that we used to search files, the tool called FZF for further search of files, and the tool that Neovim employed to search for text, which is based on grep, which is grep, which is like performance optimized search over large portions of text. They all were embedded in Neovim or called out from Neovim. But still, it felt like we are using the same toolchain, or we are in the same world. So it didn't feel completely alien that we are switching the context from one tool to another.
I agree.
Yeah. And really, I mean, your selection of tools and especially sharing that your process with others, I think it's the most valuable part. I always draw some comparison between development and baking, and I've been getting into sourdough baking lately, which involves a lot of fermentation processes, especially with non-wheat breads. And there are lots of videos out there these days, and some videos are like, oh yeah, like you need to have this like $200 proofing box or something. I mean, it's nice, but there are people who are like, okay, I got this heated blanket and I got my meat probe with thermometer, so I rigged like my own proofing box for just $15 through all this. So this is really great, I think, and both of these are valid. I mean, if you can afford and if you need 200 proofing box, by all means go get it. but many people, I think, could just make do with whatever they can. So yeah, so thank you, Vadim, so much sharing your process with everyone.
Thank you. And this reminds me that these tools, if not all, vast majority of these tools are open source. They are free, so they cost nothing to
Yeah.
use, at least to try out and see if it works for you or if it doesn't. For the integration suite, this is where I used a trial account. So in the past, I used a free tier, but free tier for individual developers is gone. So this trial account, it expires from time to time. My dear free tier, we're missing you.
Yeah, that was a real bummer. I'm still scratching my head why it was necessary to make such restriction. To be honest, I don't understand that, because everyone, I think every person who really took advantage of it was like you and some other people I've heard from as well. They're all very prominent members of communities. They constantly share something either on videos or at SAP community meetings. So why why SAP? What did they gain? I don't really understand. I mean, yeah, there probably some small expense for them, but is it really commensurable with what you lost and what you will not be able to do and share with others? I don't know. I hope someone is watching there and SAP, know, you need to make this right. Yeah, you need to. Yeah, you need to acknowledge people like Vadim and many others who not just sit there and grab all the knowledge for themselves, but share with others. So yeah.
I fully echo that. So it really is required to have something, tiny tenants, that we can use for learning, we can use for knowledge sharing, we can use for prototyping, for non-commercial purpose.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're done with the Neovim for now, but if you allow me, we are not done with the text. So we edited text, which is great. We have some other tools which we can use as well. And this is something I wanted to share here as well. So the next one which I want to show is it's not based on Neovim, it's based on scripting. And what will be different here is the shell that we're using. So if I look into what shell I use currently, I use ZSH. You may be using Bash or some Fish or some other shells, which are command-oriented. So the at the center of the attention is a command or sequence of commands that we execute, or pipe. There is another approach, and given that we are talking about data and we're talking about configuration as data, there is another approach. We look into activities that we execute where everything revolves around data, but not the commands that we execute. And this is where the shell called new, a new shell, comes handy. So new itself is a language, a scripting language, and new shell is the shell that we can use and that natively uses new as a language. So literally it comes with the view that everything that we execute, we either ingest data, then we execute certain data steps that transform data or analyze data as a pipeline, and then we produce the output. And the output can go to the screen, it can go to the file, or even it can go to the database, to SQLite. And I will show you that from developer perspective, it's very quick to get into this. And this we will expand the use case. We will again analyze quite a lot of packages that exist in the tenant. So again, we will use those APIs to access and to analyze the tenant. What I will do is I will go to, actually, I will leave this folder. I will go to new to start the shell. And you see that nothing changed. And it doesn't mean that we didn't invoke shell. So now if I look into where we are in the new shell. And you may notice that we even use slightly different notation. So we can see it from some comments. So for example, if I execute ls command, this is how ls output looks in the sh. If I now execute the same command in new, you will see that the output is different. Here the output is tabular.
Mm.
And there are some commands like PS for processes or ls and some others which were rewritten to support these capabilities of Nushell. And it enriches some data and then it allows to manipulate with this data. So as an example, what I will do is I will be copy pasting few commands just to speed this up. We will execute a script and we first will look into what's the output, and then we will see that it doesn't take much effort to get this output ready. So there is a configuration file which includes client ID, client secret, and some connectivity details to the tenant. Nothing very special, nothing very fancy. Literally, it's the service key that we have in the BTP cockpit. And then the script itself. We execute. It connects, it uses the same API to dump data about packages, and now we get the output. You will see that the output is not something which is not in the format. I mean, text reminds us that we got the data about packages, but it's not something that is common to us. So the format is Neon, which is based on, which is like JSON for JavaScript. Neon is for new, so it's like compacted JSON. So again, it's data, so some data optimizations happen. We don't need to repeat attributes each and every time in the array. So we define them, they get output once at the beginning, and then we see values coming in here. So it allows compacting. But what it also allows is we can now pipe it and say that from Neon, we would like to output, for example, to JSON. And now we got our normal JSON with all the attributes of the packages in there. What we can do also, we can continue and yeah, I will show, not this one, I will show the script as well. So in scripts, and it was the CPI packages. So this is the whole script that was required. So we read the service key, and a new shell is useful in the sense a lot of commands which we would normally execute as separate bash or ZSH commands, they are already a part of the language. So they can be executed within the language itself, which makes it more compact. For example, we don't need curl anymore. We can use curl if we want, or HTTP, but there is embedded command to interact with HTTP requests. There is embedded command to read files and parse them in different formats. We get the access token and we invoke API. That's short as it. And all properties that we need to take extra, we can pipe this. Again, we operate in the sense that we retrieved some data from somewhere. In this case, part of this data came from the file, another part came from the HTTP request, and then we pipe it, and then we push it further until we have some output, a list of packages. What we can do is we can make it another script for iFlows. So again, for the specific package, we picked up information about flows which are contained in that. Very similar how we used it when we dumped it into the Git repository. And for this one, I will show how quickly we can bring it from non-interactive mode to interactive. So for example, we don't know in which package we're going to look for artifacts. The tenant. Then we have a list of packages. I'm not a UI developer, so my UI development skills are really basic, but it's just a list of packages which it found in the tenant. Then we can select which artifacts we're interested to look into, and then it produces the output. So this script is a bit longer. So if I look into the script, artifacts. So this script is a bit longer because it also has some input validation and so on. So it has some checks. The first one was very basic, so it didn't have any error handling and so on. But you see that, and half of this script, only 1/3 of the script is formatting of the selection lists and so on. So it's more for UI rather than for the core logic of the script. So with this script, you can see that everything we do is we literally pipe activities with the data that we ingested into the script before we produce the output. And this kind of piping may give us capabilities and functionality to develop really long pipes like this one. So we picked up again the packages script, converted. We picked up only packages of which start with a demo. We selected very specific attributes from there. And for one of attributes, we converted it from Unix epoch time into human readable time. And then we get a table. So our demo packages with a selection of attributes and human readable timestamp of last modification. So these pipes, they can go really long. So we can, for example, save it to CSV. So we saved it to CSV, and then if I look into packages, I have a CSV file with the same output I had in table. So the formatting and the way how we save it is completely detached, and also the way how we ingest data, it's completely detached from what we do with the data. So with this way, we can modify, we can select data. So it's another way using the shell capabilities. So no text editor, nothing. Using the shell capabilities, how we can manipulate with the large portions of data, or at least we can analyze them and build some outputs.
So Vadim, I wanna stop for just a second here. So I spend some time in shell. I'm not there every day, but I do stuff in the shell and terminal all the time. That last command, the CSV command that you just did, I believe for me would take the trophy of most piped command I've ever seen in my life. Like that's the power of piping, right? But like I think that I don't think I've ever seen in person like something that has been more piped than that. That is so cool. So cool.
I'll make another one. Just a bit. It's we can actually combine. So this one is I put a lot of intermediate comments which extract specific values and transform values before they save. Another one, it's simpler, so it doesn't have transformation, but it saves to the database. So just in here, and we are done. So if I now look into
SQLite, yeah.
I'll see that it's a SQLite. It's a normal table in SQLite. We didn't need to do anything except that using comments which are part of Nushell. So, and we can literally mix and match all these things. So there are way more comments that we can involve to work with different formats, to work with the different OS capabilities or network capabilities. So it's literally just a fraction of what we can do. It's literally to give the idea how we can get something from somewhere, for example, from the file or from API, then we can manipulate formats of input or output. We can extract different parts of data, and we can also transform this data. So this example was quite basic. So we literally just transformed Unix epoch time into human readable time. But you can imagine that we can build up more complex examples where we need to transform data or to check data or to filter data. And capabilities to put it in the output. It's just, you see, with just a single comment, we decided whether we would like to put it in the table output, or we would like to transform it into CSV and save it into CSV file, or we would like to save it in the database table. So yeah,
beautiful.
that one,
just beautiful.
It's not compatible with Bash and ZSH. That's something that we have to keep in mind, that Nushell is not POSIX compliant as opposed to Bash or ZSH. So some commands that we got used to in Bash may not work in Nushell. But this approach, this mindset of stepping away from command-centric and focusing on data that we work with, that may become useful in some use cases.
Yeah.
And since we are looking into this, we see quite a lot of familiar commands, like we have where, we have select. So this is very, for those who write SQL statements or for those who work with SQL in general, it shall be quicker to get a grasp of this part because it reminds SQL to some extent. And since we talk about SQL, I mean, SQL is not new technology, but sometimes, even in the world of APIs, sometimes we just need SQL to be executed. And it would be nice if we could have written something like this. So we have a table, CPI integration package, and we want to select exactly the same attributes in the SQL way. CPI and cloud products, normally they don't provide access to databases. So normally we are abstracted with OData or just APIs, and then we interact with APIs. And as much as APIs are thought to be, or data is thought to be, or data in particular, a webified flavor of SQL, because a lot of system comments of OData specification, they match SQL comments. Sometimes we just need to SQLize OData calls or SQLify OData calls. And this is something that we can also do. There we go.
Oh, that's just beautiful.
Awesome.
So for me, since SQL was my first like structured data manipulation language that I learned, like everything on top of that, like RESTful APIs or GraphQL or whatever, in my brain, I'm always starting from the base of SQL and then like translating it to whatever other protocol or whatever other style, right? So like in a sense, this is like coming back home, right? This is like
Yep.
now you're in your safe space of like, oh, it's just SQL now. Oh, thank God, right? Like that's the beauty of this. I love that. I love it.
And sometimes it's exactly what you need. So when you
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
tabular data, or if you have data that you can transform into tabular data, SQL is our friend for many, many years.
Mm.
And we can build more complex queries. So for example, we execute select statement, but we want to output it as JSON. And here I use another tool called JQ for scanning and extraction of data from JSON. So we can represent similar data in JSON.
Mm.
And that data is not something that we have on our machine. So that data all comes from API calls to CPI. So the tool that we have here is, now we step away from Nushell, the tool that we have here is called Steampipe. And Steampipe is the tool that we can use to run SQL statements where data is extracted using calls to something. It can be called to the file, it can be called to API, the REST API, SOAP API, anything.
Mm.
Anything that we can call programmatically. So what I did here is I developed a plugin for Steampipe. So Steampipe has a lot of plugins for different cloud providers. So if you think about AWS or Azure or some other Docker engine, we can extract lots of data using that, and we can write our own plugins. So we literally implement how we represent data that we can extract from something. So we can execute query, and in the SAP community, we have Antonio Mardiaga, who is the SAP developer, and he is specializing in integration technologies. And he already published similar plugin for BTP, where we can query data about BTP account, about sub-accounts, and some objects within sub-accounts, also using Steampipe. So these plugins we can write ourselves. They are written in Go. So that's something that is quite different, for example, for the common languages that we use in SAP Integration Vault, but that is it. And then we can compose normal SQL statements. So what it does is it doesn't store anything locally. So when we execute this process under the bonnet, it spins up or it connects to PostgreSDB. And in PostgreSDB, we have the concept of a foreign data wrapper. So foreign data wrapper means that Postgres thinks that it's a normal table, but data that comes into this table is not persisted in the table, but is an output or is result of calling some middleware or proxy. And
Yeah.
Steampipe is that proxy where we can then plug in different plugins, install different plugins. And then if we look into tables, and here I will need to go to Steampipe. You will see that these two tables are, so far I implemented it just for packages and for integration flows. And we have many more object types. We have value mappings, script collections, message mappings. So actually it would be interesting to hear from community if there is an interest in such plugins, because then we can look and I can, for example, extend it, provide capabilities to query other object types. So we can see it in here as if it was a normal table. Except that data is not stored in database. So whenever we make this kind of select, it makes calls to APIs and brings data back. So there is a cache which is used in the process. So if I execute the command similar statement now, based on data that has been already extracted, then it will be extracted from the cache. We can invalidate the cache, or we can even disable cache. But as soon as we exit Steampipe process, it's gone. And this cache is only in memory of the process. So it's not dumped into on the file system. So what we see in the table is the result of calling those APIs. And what we can do, I mean, those were, I will do like this. Those were simple examples. I will enable multi-line support, and now we will make, actually no, but we will firstly do the other thing. So we will firstly flush the tenant and load something more. So what I will do is I will firstly delete everything that we have in the tenant.
Oh no.
No! Oh no!
Going away.
It's going up in flames.
Done. So the tenant currently is empty. And now I will import a couple of custom packages that I created. And then I will also copy prepackaged content into this tenant. And rather than having a list of predefined packages, what it will do is it will go to API subcom. It will extract a list of all packages which were created by SAP and which are not deprecated and which are for CPI. And it will start importing them into the tenant. So it will take some time. It's more than 400 packages, but that's the bulk tool that it's yet another Nushell script. And given that new supports concurrency natively, then all these calls are happening concurrently. And then while this gets uploaded, what we will do is we will go back to Steampipe and we will see how we can execute a slightly more complex SQL statement. This one. Just copy it from my cheat sheet. This one. So we have select, which has joins on two tables because part of data is in the package attributes, another part is in integration flows. We will select with a strict selection and also with wildcards, and we will apply order to the output. So this select statement is probably more realistic. It's closer to real life selects where we need to join tables, and here the join happens within the Steampipe itself, because APIs that we have for CPI, they don't have navigational attributes, so we cannot navigate from one entity to another entity. So this kind of gluing results we will have to do outside. It's empty because we are still loading packages, and so probably some packages which I wanted to search for, or those which include S4HANA, haven't yet been uploaded.
The building is still being rebuilt by the builders right now.
Yep, work in progress. That one will take some time because it loads a lot of packages. So I just relaxed web conditions so that it only searches for standard packages which are editable, which are not configure only. But effectively, we would be able to see those which include S4HANA as well when this script will be
they get
over.
there, yeah.
And you can see that, so now we can see all these tables in tabular format. We can save them to JSON, we can save them to CSV. So further, we can manipulate this data, we can output this data. And you see that literally we are working in our comfort zone, we are working with a Postgres SQL. And from compliance perspective, given that it doesn't get persisted unless we want it to get persisted, so unless we save it to some file, by default, it's only in memory. We exit it, this is gone. So we are not concerned that there will be some data leaks, at least from perspective of persisted data that can be leaked elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And if we need to analyze this data, it's all in there, it's all tabular, and all the things that we can execute in Postgres using SQL statements, they are all in here. They're all our friends.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
And shout
I
out
love me
to
some Postgres too. Yeah.
shout out to MadMess005. Everyone, whoever worked with iDocs, that's gonna bring some NAM flashbacks for sure. Awesome.
Yeah. And you see that even though under the bonnet it had to call quite a lot, make quite a lot of invocations. So in order for this select statement to get executed, it firstly needed to fetch a list of packages. It's one call. And then for each package, it needed to extract a list of iflows. And there is no bulk for that. So literally for a list of packages, we needed to go one by one and extract this data. But given that it supports concurrency natively as well, so in the plugin, I implemented it concurrently. So extraction of this data, retrieval of this data from the tenant about different iflows, it happened. It didn't happen instantly, but it happened quickly enough so that we don't need to wait long time.
Yeah.
Here we go. We found some S4HANA, and if we want, we can just so that we see how many entries we needed to query count. CPI Integration. Oops, yeah, I'm in multi-line, so I needed. So right now it's 500. It's not many. It will be by the end of this script execution, there will be a few thousands of integration flows. It's pretty close across more than 400 packages.
Yeah.
So it's not the largest tenant. It's not the largest amount of iflows, but when we talk about hundreds of packages and thousands of integration flows contained in those hundreds of packages, it's already a quite meaningful amount of development done placed in one CPI tenant.
Yeah.
So that's another example. You see, like we have the same APIs. We didn't deviate from those APIs. We literally use the same APIs. We used different approaches. We used different tools. Sometimes it was the text editor extended with some plugins like Neovim. Sometimes in other case, it was a different shell, Nushell. In some other case, it was a different tool which allowed us to use SQL statement and run the SQL statements. But literally everything revolved around the same data and around the same APIs that were called under the hood.
Like from a functional perspective, like since I assume that the actual UI in CPI is also using the APIs in that same way, this is no different than simply a different user interface to the platform, right? It's not any different. It's just like I said before, it's different tools in the backpack to do the same thing, right? It's so cool. I was gonna ask you because you probably saw me writing this down when you were talking, Vadim. My question I have, like, where do you go? You as just like a nerd who's just like constantly adding to your tool belt and learning things, where do you go to find the next thing you're going to play with? Like, where do you search around? Where do you interact? Where do you add things to your knowledge base that allows you to continue tinkering like this?
I would say that to a large extent, I look into tools which are not original for SAP ecosystem, which come from the outside. And I look into how those can be applied. Because the tools that we looked into today, Neovim, Nushell, Steampipe, I don't think that they were common in SAP world, but they have their use case outside of SAP world. And those use cases, they resonate to some scenarios that are in demand in SAP ecosystem, or for example, in cloud integration. So that's one example, and it's a lot of learning outside of SAP, technologies which can be applied and which can play well with SAP, but which are not native, for example, for SAP integration developer. And the other one is, quite commonly, I also look what other community colleagues are doing. So if I take an example of FlashPipe, so when Swee was developing FlashPipe, he firstly developed it in Java, then he rewrote it in Go. And actually, he was the driver for me. So he motivated me to get into Go development, to start learning Go language. Before that, I didn't develop in Go. It was for me quite an interesting learning. So we talked with him about what was the motivation for him to switch to Go. And then it sparked the interest for me to give it a try, to give it a go. Even though in SAP integration, we don't use Go language. So Go language is quite alien for SAP integration. It was a lot of learning. It is still a lot of learning for me because it's not only the language itself, but the ecosystem around it. So linters, static analyzers, the system that we use to build and to verify builds. So all these things were new learnings to me, which was quite exciting. And some other things that come to my mind about what tools can be used, they come from what activities I need to do where I don't find the standard tool. So for example, this demo about mass update of values of some configuration properties in a bunch of integration flows, that's something which I faced and keep facing from time to time when I have to mass edit integration flows as an integration developer. And in absence of something that I can use in standard, so it's something that I cannot do in WebUI of Integration Suite. I started to look into, is there any feasibility to execute, to fulfill this task, or at least to complete parts of this task in a way that we can use it for bulk operations. And this is where I came across FlashPipe, another tool, CPI lint, that Morten Wittrock developed for static analysis, so that after we changed something, we can also analyze before we push it to the tenant whether it complies to certain rules, for example, naming conventions or some configurations that we use or which we shall not use. So this all can be plugged in, and these tools can stay outside of the tenant. So literally, they can stay closer to the developer before changes come to the tenant. So by the time the changes hit the tenant, they are kind of vetted, checked, and they shall be of a higher quality. I would love to do so. Another use case, which I see more and more often, is audit, analysis, and automation. And this is where it's a mixture of operations to read data and to analyze data. And for automation, it's operations related to mass update or some update. So this bulk analysis of configurations in the tenant, they can become handy when we need to check that, for example, everything is compliant. Or if we just want to see what are configurations that use some feature that we would like, for example, disable or discourage the further use. And for this kind of scenarios, literally we end up having a lot of data, configuration data, that we need to analyze and where we need to apply some checks, some rules. So more or less, it's about analysis of semi-structured data, being it XML or JSON or some other format. That's another use case which I commonly face, and where I see that we need some tools. We need some tools that can help us accomplish these tasks. And here I talked and I illustrated on the examples of cloud integration. But if we extend that, if we think that literally we have some interface that we can call programmatically, even not API, so maybe it will not be API, maybe it will be something else. Or in the cloud world, it's API that we're calling. And as soon as we can get meaningful data out of it, then suddenly we have quite a number of tools that can help us analyze it.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Just another random follow-up question that popped in my head as we've been going through here. The stuff that you showed us today, all of it super cool. As you have kind of gone through and like assembled your own tools and done this stuff, which piece of this stuff today was like the hairiest thing to get figured out? The weirdest thing, the hardest. Which piece was the weirdest thing to get figured out? I think is my question.
I would say performance. So I just checked that now we have a bit of more than 3,000 iPhones. So now we have a lot of data to check and to analyze. Performance. So APIs, and you see that I just repeated that that call, so it was very quick. Performance in the sense that we have APIs which are exposed by the product, and we can play with them in Bruno, in Postman, elsewhere. So we know what kind of data we get back. We know what we want to achieve. So for example, we want to change some attributes or we want to select some attributes. But commonly, we have to execute a lot of different calls under the hood before we can arrive to the meaningful output, like tabular output, like we saw here, that we can further analyze, like slice and dice, filter, reformat, transform, and so on. And if I was to do this sequentially, so you can imagine that calling packages API once, and then for each and every package, like 400 packages, to call it and to extract this data, append to the output, call it another one, append to the output, we will spend way more time seeing the spinning clock and waiting while the output is produced. So the concurrency, the safe concurrency implementation, it was quite demanding task. And I'm not yet over with that, because one part is how I implement concurrency and how I can optimize this combination of gluing of different API outputs into one table. So what the table that you see in here is the result of calling two APIs. One of them was called once, another one was called several hundred times. And then the data was combined. So it's nice looking for the output, but the work that was needed to be done to glue this together and to make it, I would like to believe, robust, it took some time. And the other part of this question is we need to make sure that we don't abuse the use of these APIs in the sense that we don't get throttled. So we need to have this balance between how quickly we would like to run these APIs, how concurrently we would like to run these APIs on the client side. And on the other hand side, not to degrade performance or not to introduce the risk of degradation of performance of the target, for example, of CPI tenant. So this balance, I don't think that's something which is unique to my use cases, because I come from Java background for NetWeaver Java, for PIPO systems, and concurrency for concurrent applications that are stateful applications, which also need to make sure that we guarantee consistency of persistent data. It's quite a common challenge. Here, if we take this outside of the equation, the tool may become, if we have like 5-10 packages, we probably will not notice much difference. But if we have hundreds, we will definitely notice this degradation of performance on the client side. And to some extent, at some level, it may become not very usable because we will have to wait too much time. And to make this usability better, this is where I spend quite some time to see how I can implement it in safe concurrent way. Another thing which was a lot of learning for me, well, Go was one thing. Another thing was the whole Neovim concept. So when I just dived into the world of Neovim, for me, all the things about how it manipulates with data. So what are concepts of modes? So are you in insert mode? Are you in command mode? Because you can execute terminal commands in Neovim, so it has embedded terminal. the concept of buffers and how this plugin system works and what kind of plugins are useful and can improve your life. It takes a while, and I think it will take way more time because plugins get evolving, new plugins are introduced, and it's like you are looking what works for you. And also, if you really want to configure it for yourself, then it requires to have a grasp of a new language, which was new to me, Lua language, because nowadays a lot of configuration for Neovim is done using Lua. So the configuration which I cloned, which I used in my setup, it's purely Lua based. It's not complex language in my personal taste. Well, to the extent where I needed to use it, it didn't feel like it's complex, but my tasks were quite basic. I didn't need to develop plugins for Neovim. I just needed to make sure I pick up the right plugins. But still, it was quite a lot of learning new thing to me, and something which I also don't use in SAP ecosystem, because that's very specific. Well, Lua itself, it's very lightweight language, so it's you may see it in some embedded systems. But in my case, it was the first time I saw it, and the first time I started to look how to write the simple config with it, it was for Neovim. And this whole thing about key mappings, about the fact that you actually use your fingers on the keyboard, and you can then quickly switch in between different commands and navigate through the text. That's something that I'm still picking up. It's like a muscle memory. I need to get used that it really becomes like a second skin.
You got to do your reps. You got to get to the
Yeah.
gym and do your finger reps, right? Yeah.
Yep, exactly. It was a bit of workout right now because I walked a bit in Neovim, so counts for today.
Yeah, for me, it's like back in the days, we didn't have any Windows or any GUI. Everything was command line. You just insert disk and then just do stuff like enter commands. Otherwise, you have no clue what to do there.
And it's
Awesome.
not like I'm die-hard Neovim user, so really I'm quite occasional user for Neovim. I have VS Code, I have Cursor, I have Z, have IntelliJ. So quite a bunch of other IDEs that I use for different purposes. So it's not like I'm spending day at night in Neovim. But there is certain use case for Neovim as well. And it's not only for Neovim, because quite a lot of those activities, to some extent, we could achieve with other tools. And as I said, some of those functions that we called and some of those tools that we called out from Neovim, they are separate tools in their own state. So we can run them from the terminal as well. So we can call them from other IDEs or just go to the terminal and call them independently. That's also an option. So I don't think that it's like to substitute something or to replace something. It's more to add another tool under the belt.
Well, okay. Yelena, unless you have anything else, I have one final question for Vadim.
Go.
Okay.
Please.
My final thing is, Vadim, is there anything else you want to share with the world or plug? Right? Go to my website, follow my Twitter, like whatever. The floor is yours to plug anything else that you want to get our viewers to see or learn about.
I'll say that probably we will share some links for these tools.
Yeah.
Will it be feasible? So I can put some links for those tools so you can explore and you can see and you can play around. Most of those tools we can find on GitHub. And in my view, what I would like to share is and encourage. I myself, I do some development for open source for community. There are quite a lot of other colleagues. Some of them whom I mentioned now, and some many more people. It's quite useful for us, for all of us, when we hear the feedback, all sorts of feedback, positive feedback, great, negative feedback, great, feature gap, something doesn't work, great, new feature, new ideas, also great. So this really encourages us to think about where else the tools can be applied, and also if somebody develops the tool, just bring it to the community, put it under test, and see how it goes and who else can jump into it and who can work on it. It's really encouraging. And it keeps us to explore something to share some tools, to share some ideas. You see that, for example, Steampipe plugin, the plugin for querying CPI over SQL, it's something which haven't yet been published. So it lives on my private Git repo because literally it's the first time I showed it on this podcast in action. And for me, it's interesting to see whether there will be demand in that, so whether it's worth it to invest more time. For me, it was quite a great learning. The whole this concept, how we can extract data through APIs and represent it as SQL queryable data, for me, it was great learning. But to make it usable for the community, that would be really useful to hear feedback and to see what others think about it. So how this can be improved. That would be really useful.
Okay. Well, from the bottom of our hearts and our viewers' hearts, we want to thank you for taking the time to literally show us your train of thought, show us your tools, but also your process, right? There's such huge value in not only seeing like the links to the tools, but to seeing like there's such a great value in seeing Batman use the Bat utility belt, right? If you watch Batman use the utility belt, you learn even more about the Batarang and the grappling hook and the Batmobile and all that stuff, right? Like that's the power I think of like the sharing that we wanted to do. And so I want to thank you for your time in setting this up and then like literally typing it out and walking it through with it. Like that mental view is valuable to me, and I know it's valuable to our listeners and our viewers. And we just thank you so much. We really do.
Thank you. It's always my pleasure. I mean, I say always, it's just the second time. It's always my pleasure to prepare something and to bring it to the floor and to see how it lands. Do you see it useful? For me, I'm quite opinionated because when I work on these tools, when I try to learn something new, I'll literally go with a deep dive into that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I may become overexcited with some technology, which is not of that interest or of that use for the wider community. So that's always great to hear what others are thinking, what professionals who really work day in and day out with it. Do they see the value in it, or they don't, or they will offer some other view that I didn't think about, and I really need to sit down and think, okay, yes, that's really cool. I need to think about that. I need to learn that.
Okay.
And also,
so that being said, we will stop the cameras. We will close out this episode. Hopefully in the future we get episode 3 of Vadim. Maybe we'll see what you're up to in a little while from now. But thanks to our listeners and viewers for watching this stuff. Thanks again to Vadim. And guys, have a great day. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
thank you
Take
to
care.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.